Welcome to Champion Stepdad Podcast. We are exploring the unique role of stepdads and how to apply performance psychology skills to become better father figures and role models. Join the Champion Stepdad Facebook group and build your band of brothers. I'm your host, Neil Wattier, and whether you enjoy the audio or the video version of the podcast, you can either subscribe through your favorite podcast hosting service or the YouTube channel. Either way, I'm excited you're here. Today, I want to talk about agility. Physical agility is the ability to change directions quickly. It minimizes your transition time from one movement pattern to another, and it's very important for athletes and high-risk professionals. Mental agility also helps you change directions quickly, but it refers to your thought patterns. It helps you think more effectively, learn quickly, and adjust to new circumstances. It helps with problem solving, creativity, reasoning, comprehension, and communication. Mental agility also helps you identify and overcome thinking traps. Thinking traps are overly rigid patterns in your thinking that can cause you to miss critical information about a situation or an individual. They often occur in the heat of the moment, and they're associated with triggers. Now, the word trigger itself I have found has been a trigger in and of itself. Some people really don't like that word. They don't like the insinuation that something happens and they lose control. If we are going to dive into self-awareness and really look at where we can improve, we have to be honest with ourselves that everyone is triggered about something. When we talk about, when I say the word trigger, I'm talking about a process within the brain that goes all the way back to prehistoric, like way back. This is a survival mechanism that has always been there, and the brain has not evolved beyond that. It's the response, it's the survival response that you probably recognize more of the fight or flight response. Something happens, our brain kicks in, shuts down what's unnecessary so that we can react, so we can survive. And that has not changed a whole lot. Even though we typically live fairly safe lives, our brain still responds, and it doesn't recognize the difference between real or perceived threat. So if you perceive threat, whether that be somebody walking in a restaurant looking strange, or simply driving down the road and somebody cuts you off and you get mad, that is, you're getting triggered. If you drive in traffic and you get frustrated, you get irritated, you get angry, or you feel high anxiety and you're nervous, you're triggered. Your body is responding to your fight or flight mechanism. And it could be in a lot of situations. It could be a regular reoccurring event. It could be a specific person that just drives you crazy. And when you hear their name, you see their face, or you just imagine that they're going to appear in the room, something happens and you get nervous or angry or frustrated. Whatever that emotion is that you feel, that's the result of you telling yourself something. And it's not your brain playing tricks on you. It's you not realizing the natural process that your brain is going through. And so the self-awareness comes from understanding that this happens to all of us and accepting the fact that you get triggered. And triggers leading to counterproductive emotions and counterproductive behaviors are difficult to change because they are tied to those long-standing practiced beliefs or thought patterns. In some of the previous episodes, I did talk about those mental shortcuts that result from these repeated patterns. And without awareness of these occurring frequently, repeatedly, you're not going to be able to control or change them. So let's talk about what a thinking trap. Let's give some examples. A common one that we've all done before, and remember, these are so common, and when we talk about it, chances are you've done at least one of these, and some of us have done several of them. Jumping to conclusions is a common, probably the most common thinking trap. It's when you believe you are absolutely certain about something despite having little or no evidence to support it. There's something happens and you fill in the blanks. you make assumptions, or you tell yourself a story. But why this is so detrimental is because it's not just a hunch. You are absolutely certain. And a lot of times when you fill in the gaps of those stories, you stop fact finding and gathering actual data. And it can be destructive to any of your relationships, because now you're telling yourself a story and you're convinced that it's true. Now that creates conflict between you and another person, or you with yourself, just filling in the blanks of a scenario you're heading into. Another one that's very common is mind reading. Mind reading is very common in close relationships. It's assuming that you know what another person is thinking, or it's expecting another person to know what you are thinking. Now, I know you've got a mental picture of something that's happened sometime in your life where you either assumed you knew what another person was thinking, or you expected them to know what you were thinking. And we think about it, and it's really just silly to think that, oh, well, they should just know that. If you've ever said that, or you've ever thought that, you are mind reading, or you're expecting other people to mind read. And it is absolutely counterproductive to healthy relationships. If you make the assumption, then you better make time to actually say it or ask the question. Because you can't expect people to read your mind. Say it. And it's okay to be frustrated. Let them know, like, hey, you know what, my mind, this is what my mind is telling me. Let's have a conversation about this. Some of the other ones, we're not going to go through all of these. I got a long list, but there's the emphasis all on me, or the emphasis of all on them. You know, you got the victim mentality of me, or you've got the outward expression of fault, blame, and judgment of them, like everybody else or circumstances are the sole cause of every problem. So you are never the sole cause of every problem, and at no time is somebody else the sole cause. If you find yourself fixating on one thing or one person, you are involved in a thinking trap, and you need to take a step back. Another one has to do with time and so there's time and events. So always is like it's a time based, always everything going wrong, negative events, and they're unchangeable. This is really, really toxic, because it leads to helplessness and hopelessness, where people are just losing control. They feel like they're losing control. The one about everything can be judgment on worth, right? It could be character assassination, judging a person's worth based on a single event. I saw them do this, so I can't ever trust them, or they're worthless. You know, we hear this in the military, like, don't trust that dude. I worked with him once and he screwed it all up. You can't judge worth based on one thing. Like, if you see a repeated pattern, well, okay, well, now we have to have a bigger conversation, but you need to slow yourself down and make sure that you're not judging. It's not limiting your ability to target the behavior. And that's where, when we interact with our children, don't attack the person, attack the behavior, because that's where you can affect change. You don't want to minimize people. You want to affect change in their behavior. When you face, let's go back to jump into conclusions. So there's what we call critical questions that you can ask yourself. So if you're in the thinking trap of jumping to conclusions, the first thing you need to do is slow down, because you are filling in the blanks and you don't have all the information. You need to slow down and ask yourself, what is the evidence for and against my thoughts? This could have happened to me last night. Cindy was working last night and working at a hospital. Sometimes it's crazy. And she just sent me a simple text message. I already knew she was going to be working late. And she said, I was just getting ready to leave, and somebody called a code, medical terminology. Basically, somebody's heart stopped, or somebody came in dead, and they were trying to revive this person. And She just said, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to help. I'm going to stick with the crew. My mind could have went a lot of different places, but I didn't. I stopped and I said, what is the evidence for and against my thoughts? If I would have had the thought that, oh, maybe she's leaving work, but she's telling me that she's staying at work, right? And you start filling in the blanks of, well, where's she going and what's she doing? And okay, well, maybe she's staying at work, but okay, what doctor's she talking to? You know, who's the hot doctor that she's talking to? You know, you can fill in the blanks. You can create a story in your mind. And I've said numerous times, your brain is easily tricked. It'll believe whatever you tell it. If you were convinced of it, you're going to convince your brain. And you can fill in the blanks with whatever you want to put in there. And you will absolutely convince yourself that it is true. And so that when she gets home and she's had a tough day and they lost a patient, the last thing I should be thinking about is, oh, really? You just stuck around at work because you didn't want to be at home? Really? That's what she wants to hear after she comes home from losing a patient? No, man, like you got to slow it down, and you can't assume information. You need to ask yourself, what's the evidence for and against? And if you do have evidence, then go on the evidence that you have, not stories that you tell yourself. Mind reading, speak up. You have to ask yourself, did I express myself? If you're assuming somebody else is going to mind read, you have to ask yourself, did I express myself? Did I explicitly say this, 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 and this? And if you've had that conversation numerous times and you're dealing with somebody who's very forgetful, okay, well, that's a different thing. That's no longer mind reading. But if you don't explicitly say, hey, I would like, you know, to go to this restaurant, or I'd like to go out here, or, you know, if you don't, as a couple, discuss, you know, what does Valentine's Day to mean to you, and what's the expectations, right? Standards and expectations. If you don't have that conversation, you can't assume, right? You can't you can't assume that somebody should have given you something for your birthday, or they should have taken you on a trip, or they should be buying you diamonds, right? You can't have that expectation if you at some point in your relationship don't have a conversation. This is what I expect for my birthday. I want to be treated really, really well. For me, I just had a birthday a couple days ago, you know, and my daughter had a rough day and she didn't call me until the day after. Okay, whatever. Like it's my birthday, but you know, I've been in the I can't even talk this morning. I've been in the military so long. I've missed so many holidays, so many birthdays, so many special events. The day itself doesn't even matter to me. But people know that because I've had that conversation with people. I've told them, you know, it would be nice to have a call from my kids on my birthday. And both of them called me. My daughter called me the day after. Is that a big deal? No. And she knows it. She still apologized because she wanted to call me, but she was just having a rough day. But they know when I say, you know what, it's okay. Don't worry about it. I appreciate you calling me at least the day after. They know that I'm not just filling their heads with bullshit and blowing them off, but I'm really upset. I'm not. I've had that conversation and they know that it's okay. Hey, you know what? This year we're going to have Christmas in January because I've done it so many times. You know, I've been deployed over holidays, and it's okay. You have to have that conversation. Did I express myself? Did I speak up? Do they know my expectations? Or on the reverse, did I ask for information? And you got to remember, mind reading is assuming people know what you're thinking, or assuming you know what people are thinking. When you or somebody else is experiencing thinking traps along the lines of it's all about me or it's all about them, then it's, you know, for people that are inward, what are the outward, what's the outward information? How did others or circumstances contribute? If somebody's looking at all the blame, placing blame on other people, how did you contribute to this? Well, you know, take a step back. Like, how did you contribute to this? Did you communicate well? When you get into people that are falling into thinking traps of everything all the time, that's where we get really, really dangerous. People are having an existential crisis, meaning they're losing hope because it just seems like everything's going wrong and it's all the time. You or them have to grab control, even if it's the slightest thing. Locus of control, what's within your control. I have a simple exercise where I draw a circle on a piece of paper, and it doesn't matter who they are. Everybody has control over something. It just depends on how simple you have to get. People that are having a severe existential crisis, ask them what they're in control of. And it could be something simple like, hey, would you like a drink? Yeah, I would. Would you like water? Would you like soda? Right? Or whatever you call it. David Poole over in France, fizzy drink or whatever you call it. Yeah, where can you grab control? What's changeable? What can I control? If it's in everything, give specific. What's the specific behavior that explains the situation, or what specific area of my life will be affected? And it's these questions that you have to ask yourself. And when you get into the always and everything, those tend to be pretty severe. I don't want to caution to say that they're rare though, because there's a lot of people that they get inside their head and they create catastrophic thinking is the word I was looking for. And that's a whole nother training scenario that we can get into. Catastrophic thinking is where you want, once again, you tell yourself a story and it becomes bigger. Every time you tell the story, it becomes bigger and bigger, bigger. It's like the fishing story, right? The fish was, 6 inches and, a couple hours later, it was 13 inches. We do that to ourselves though. If you ever find yourself in a situation in the morning, and by the evening, it's this grand problem, and maybe it was a minor inconvenience. But by the time you told yourself the story over and over again, you spun yourself up, and suddenly you've got those butterflies in your stomach and that heart beating in your chest, and you've got tight muscles because you're telling yourself a story and you're building it up to be something much bigger than it really is. If you find yourself spinning yourself up, you need to take a step back and ask yourself, what was really going on here? And that's where a lot of the thinking traps are. Just asking yourself critical questions that are counter to what you're thinking, because the thinking is the trap. So what can you do? And a lot of times we can't do this by ourselves. And that's why it's important to have a band of brothers, to have a strong relationship with our spouse so that we can have that conversation, or people feel empowered to ask you the questions without getting their ass chewed, or without you blowing up on them. Now somebody can come to you and say, what else is going on? What evidence do you have? Because I think you're jumping to conclusions here. If you find yourself making assumptions, assuming anything, or placing blame, whether it be outward or inward, I ask you to take a second, take a breath, and ask yourself that question that's counter to what you're thinking. Because we all fall victim to triggers. It's part of our brain. So don't assume that trigger is something that weak people fall to. I actually had that response from somebody one time. Oh yeah, it's a weak-minded person falls victim to triggers. No, we all do. It's part of our internal mental makeup. It's a fact. So be kind to yourself, be kind to others, ask yourself those critical questions, and really, really pay attention to, where do I fall victim to thinking traps? They're very common. We all fall victim to them, and they really do narrow your field of vision. My name is Neil Wadier. Thanks for listening. Let me know your experiences with thinking traps. Hit me up and let's have a conversation. Look me up on the Champion Stepdad Facebook group. Remember, this is a stepdad men's only group. I'm encouraged by the interest I've received from some of the ladies, but I have to give the guys a much needed private space to have the conversations and share their experiences. If you are interested, but please keep listening to the podcast, watch the videos, hit me up. You can contact me direct, neil@championstepdad.com, or look me up on my Facebook profile. I'm happy to have the conversations. I love the responses that we're getting from people, and I'm very encouraged by the growth that we've experienced within the community. So thank you very much for listening. I'm very encouraged, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon.